So just settling into a upright and balanced posture, giving the chest and belly plenty of room for the breath. Then having a sense of just softening, releasing, settling. So that's the kind of physical aspect. The mental aspect is can be called arriving. So aware that you are here, aware that you are in a body. And taking a little time just to scan the body to see what sensations are present. The many different parts of the body have different sensations in any given moment. And just to notice some of those sensations. And those sensations might tell you something, maybe tell you something about your energy right now, whether you're tired or relaxed or anxious or restless, whether there's a feeling of comfort and being settled or something else. And then feelings in the body also can give us feedback about our mental or emotional state, how we're feeling as reflected or manifested in the body. This practice of mindfulness is not one where we're trying to control those experiences or create any particular experience, but rather that we are aware of what is happening and that there's a sense of acceptance and openness, kind of receptive, and even a sense of curiosity. What feelings are here? And trying to tune in to the subtle levels of sensation and mood, energy. And once you have got some sense of how you're feeling on those different levels, the physical, the mental, the emotional, or energetic, just bringing the focus in more more closely to the breath can tune into the breath at the nostrils, just the touch of air moving in and out, or in the belly as it rises and falls with each breath. You might make a soft mental note with the breath in, out, if you're following the breath at the nostrils, or rising, falling with the breath in the belly, or the words act something like a mantra to help the mind to stay focused. Almost a reminder of where you're trying to pay attention. But even as we make the effort to be with the breath, the mind has the tendency to wander, drift into thought. So whenever you notice that you're not with the breath, that you're thinking one way or another, just acknowledge that and gently come back to the breath. You might make note of where the mind was or what kind of thought or thinking was happening. Not to judge or analyze that, simply to kind of categorize thought, to see the nature of thought. We start to see how much time we spend thinking about things that are really not useful or even meaningful oftentimes. And it can help us to be a little less attached to those thoughts, to not take them so seriously. We just see that the mind churns out thoughts. It's like a machine or a production line whose only product is thoughts, without any real purpose in that, except to create that noise in the mind. Notice if there are attitudes that come with the thoughts or about the thoughts. It's very common when we learn to meditate to start to judge ourselves, think there's something wrong if we're thinking. That simply turns into another thought, perpetuates the cycle. So as soon as we can just let go and come back to the breath, the more helpful it'll be. Again, welcome all. I am Kevin Griffin, and since March of last year, we've been going through the 12 steps using my book, One Breath at a Time, and we are currently taking a side trip into my book, Buddhism and the 12 Steps Daily Reflections, which covers the so-called promises from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and taking one promise per class. So first I'll say thank you, Denny, for that referral. Arroyo Grande. That sounds grand. Sorry, that was not even funny. But anyway, yeah, if anybody has any recommendations for treatment centers that are Buddhist or mindfulness oriented, again, I know there's one that I heard about recently, and I said, oh, now I know about one. And then, of course, I forget. We used to have this great children's book that I used to read to my daughter often. It's called Sometimes I Remember and Sometimes I Just Forget. It seemed to sum up something very essential in life. All right, so I'm on the Not Regret the Past, September 12th. So yeah, I'm not going to go read all the promises because I don't have the big book. I put the big book back on the shelf the other day. But in any case, if you're not familiar, these so-called promises, I should call them so-called promises because well, I don't know. I'm calling them that. So I'll just leave it. They come at where step 9 is being discussed in the AA Big Book, and it says if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I just forget. And so there's, we'll know a new freedom and a new happiness. And I believe the next one is we will not regret the past. So this is the passage from my Daily Reflections book, and it's from September 12th. The past is a big deal for addicts. Many meetings are consumed with people talking about their past. We all know that we made serious mistakes, that we harmed others badly, and that we harmed ourselves. The 12 steps are designed to help us come to terms with that past. By taking and sharing an inventory, trying to change or let go of our negative qualities, and finally, by making amends, we are coming to grips with all that damage. Though we know we can't turn back the clock, as much as possible, we want to resolve things and move forward. Moving forward means that we can't carry that burden with us. Regret, like guilt, is a pointless emotion. Buddhism, with its emphasis on present moment awareness, puts a fine point on this idea. There is only this moment. The past is irretrievably gone, out of reach of any effort to change. To rehash past mistakes is a fruitless exercise. This doesn't mean the past is forgotten. We learn from the past, try to correct our mistakes and grow. But to continue to berate ourselves is useless. When we come to this insight, it can be freeing. Somehow we'd felt that we deserved to continue to suffer, and that by carrying around regret and guilt, we were paying the price for our behavior. But when we see that regret serves no function but to sustain our own pain, we realize the fallacy of this stance. The gift we give to the world is our recovery. If we can move forward with kindness, generosity, compassion, and wisdom, we are doing all we can to compensate for our past mistakes. Regret cannot add anything to that. today, consider if you were still carrying the burden of regret, what would it mean to let go of that burden? Yeah, so it is such an interesting topic because you know, the idea that we will not regret the past is, it's a pretty absolute statement that I don't think can be proven. I don't think there's any scientific evidence showing that people who have worked the 12 steps do not regret the past or never regret the past. I think it's natural. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I do appreciate what I think of it more less as a promise than a suggestion that you sort of look at your regrets and try to let go of them. That you ask yourself what benefit you're getting out of them. I do think the point I make in there that we kind of sometimes it's like we carry it around as like our cross to bear or as penance, like, oh, I was so bad, I should suffer. I should continue to feel bad and rehash these past mistakes because I was so bad that I deserve to suffer. And that doesn't make much sense. It doesn't accomplish anything as that passage says. At the same time, I don't think we should, beat ourselves up if we find ourselves regretting something. You know, uh, what I think is most useful, and it comes up later in the promise, is the idea that we'll see how our experience can benefit others. Don't want to get ahead of us, but as I was looking at that passage this morning, um, it reminded me of something from my workbook. Switch over to another one of my Buddhism and the 12 Steps workbook, my oeuvre. Um, there's a passage or an exercise in here, and I guess it's in the step one part of my workbook on page 64. It's an exercise called tracing back recovery, and the idea for me in this exercise, and if you have the book, you can look at it at some point, was to first of all challenge and question and challenge the uh, sort of traditional recovery narrative of before I got clean, before I got sober, or whatever program you're in, that then you were bad and everything you did was bad. And now you're in recovery and you're doing good things. And it was this sort of black and white, uh, duality that is sometimes that I hear uh, I've heard in meetings and gotten from people that I thought was really not helpful because first of all, I don't think it's true. It doesn't make any sense that at one time we were just complete. We had no redeeming qualities, and then somehow by this magical thing of getting clean, all of a sudden now we're good. Um, and it's particularly the old stuff, the no redeeming qualities part that I don't buy, and and I think that it has this effect on us uh, of sort of throwing away everything pre-recovery and dismissing it all. Uh, um, and one of the things about that is that it doesn't make any sense because how could we turn the corner and change if we weren't doing something positive that created that change? Unless you believe that there's some sort of magical intervention by a higher power that got you clean. I mean, it's certainly it's remarkable for many of us that it happened, but I don't think it's magical. I think there are causes. And so, yeah, so just the idea of this exercise was to look at the good stuff, to look at the good stuff from your past, from even before you were in recovery, and to just bring a little bit more of a positive attitude toward that. So I don't know that I don't seem to have a lot to say about all this today. I yeah. So I'm just gonna open it up and see if people have any comments or questions or anything they wanted to toss in tonight, and we can keep the conversation going here. Anybody? Help? Rachel, were you going to say something?
Oh, okay. Hi.
You're
I didn't
unmuted,
realize
I noticed. So.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's still kind of early in the morning for me here.
Right.
And I slept late, so I kind of not totally together yet. Regretting the past. I hear a lot of people in meetings beating themselves up about what was. And, the best thing that both of these programs have taught me is to stay in the present moment. Certainly I can go down the rabbit hole, but when I catch myself going there and rehashing what happened, I now have the ability to check myself. And I realize that it's never taken me to that positive place that learning from my experience, which is slightly different, can take me. Well, obviously our lives and our filters are based on the experiences we've had. And I'm totally in agreement that not everything pre-recovery was bad, and not everything post-recovery is, perfect and wonderful, because I'm still me, but it certainly serves me no purpose to just rehash. And our minds are so weird and so quick. And I was, during the meditation, I had received a thank you for a birthday greeting to a family member. And we're not in much contact, never were, but, still friendly. And all of a sudden, then I kicked into her dad, who I no longer speak with because of some of his behaviors that I find unacceptable. So I don't want to repeat that experience. And it's like, wow, how did I get into the past so fast? I mean, it's amazing. I was on a positive and then went, yeah. So as just to state it again, so I remember it, both of these programs show me the benefits of staying in the present moment instead of rehashing the past.
Yeah. So. Thank you. It's so interesting the way our minds will take one little thing like that, like this birthday greeting contact, and then it's like where we run off to and wind up. And it is helpful. I think our mindfulness practice really helps us because we do sometimes stop. I'm not sure the ordinary person who's not sort of aware on that level stops and realizes, oh, I just took myself here. I didn't have to go here. This was like my own mind, my own choice, and I don't have to stay here. I can visit and, say thank you and depart. The other thing that just came up for me was that, maybe addicts and people in recovery we have another one of the ways we think of ourselves as being so unique is that like we have such a past as if other people didn't, and it's like, you know, anybody who was like 20 at one time in their life or 16 or whatever, uh, did stupid things, and it doesn't, you don't have to be an addict to make mistakes. And so we don't have to, again, sort of think of ourselves as uniquely flawed. Deborah, hello. And you're still muted.
Thank you. Yeah, that was an interesting experience, and I just had one of those today. And I was with my sponsor today. We went to have some breakfast, and we really didn't do any step work, but we were just kind of visiting. And I was talking about some of the family that I just did a trip back to New Jersey, where I'm from, and visited some cousins I really didn't know that well, and was pleasantly surprised that they were, well, let me add to that it was, I also visited some cousins I knew quite well and grew up with. And that part of the family is like absolutely crazy, right? It's the, the unhealthy, the reason why, not the reason why, but, the inability to deal with family, I don't know, whatever it is, values, whatever it is. And the cousins that I knew that were crazy, that's what I call them. They're not like, like mental institution crazy, but they are just like, how do you survive crazy? It's just like, I'm from Italian descent. And so everything is emotional and big and huge and a deal and that kind of crazy. And the ones I know really haven't changed. And then there was a cousin that I hardly know at all. She was like 6 months old when I moved to California, and I saw her at her wedding for like, well, during her wedding, so I didn't get to see her much. And so we stopped by and visited her, and she got out. She got out of that craziness, and I thought, wow, I really like her. And it's like, wow. And there's a couple of cousins that, I think that, a lot of us just wanted to get out so much that we don't communicate with a lot of the people, the relatives that we don't know. And that's one of my things about changing. But I remember as I was talking to my sponsor, and I said, yeah. And he says, well, what about his mother? Do you know much? I said, I hate her. That was the first thing that came out of my mouth was, I hate her. And what was that for? I don't really hate her.
Wow.
I mean, I've been practicing long enough that hate isn't healthy for me, right? But it just came out. It just was an automatic response. I hate her, and then after I said it, I went, what did I just say? No, I don't hate her. I feel sorry for her. I have, well, she's not with us anymore, but so it's just kind of interesting how that old stuff can just pop out. And when it was coming out of my mouth, I had the same feeling of, that just, the tenseness in my body and all that. And I went, wait, whoa, because she's so far in my past. She's not present where I was able to kind of, okay, well, this isn't so bad. So it's just kind of interesting. I thought it was just kind of interesting. And we just kind of like, oh, that's interesting way of dealing with the past that you're not even aware of. I hadn't thought about her for years.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Like you hadn't updated your way of relating to her to like a, more compassionate view. It's like you still have the old version in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
So,
Yeah. And I really relate to that thing of like people who got out,
yeah.
that in my family, a lot of the next generation, like my brothers and my kids, well, I mean, I only have one child, but are like much more sort of functional, and a bunch of them are sober, and uh, like it's like they definitely sorted it out, better than me and my brothers did.
Mm.
Although my brothers are doing pretty well, all four of the five. Um, hmm. But, well, the other thing, as you're talking about, like, going back, because 'cause I'm from Pennsylvania, and I was back there recently, and so that it's when you've live out here and you go back, then it really is like you're going back into the past, and it really, like, there's a whole weird thing that can happen around that, like how you can get triggered in ways that you aren't when you're far away from it. I've always it occurred to me a long time ago that, I moved to the place in the lower 48 states that is the furthest away from where I came from that I could possibly be. It wasn't intentional, but maybe it was.
Mm.
So,
Well, one of my experiences that I've had a couple of years ago, and again this time, is the few times I've gone to Jersey, things change. The
yeah,
places where you used to hang out aren't there anymore. And,
right.
a lot of family moved to different parts of the country. Um, but it's almost like it gets to a point where it's not even real anymore. It's
Mm.
almost like, what proof is there that anything really happened? There's no proof. Everything is so different. And I
Yeah.
found that to be really kind of spiritual for me,
Mhm.
because it really puts us in the present. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't, you know, I guess that's a totally different science, maybe, but it's just like, who's to say this ever really happened? And I did that
Yeah.
years ago. I went back to where I hit my bottom, and
Mhm.
the same thing. It's like there wasn't a person that was less than 20 years younger than me present.
Yeah.
And it was during COVID, so the bars were closed, and all these places I used to hang out were closed. And it was
Yeah.
like, wow, did I really live here? It was amazing. Interesting.
Well, I think I don't know if this is what you're experiencing, but I think it's that we hold those places in our minds, and they're frozen in our minds in a certain time and as a certain situation. Then you go back and you realize, oh, that doesn't exist anymore.
Mm.
And it really does blow up the whole idea, like, oh, like, because we can in our minds still feel as if the past exists, and then you go there, it's like, oh no, it does not exist, it's not here. "Oh, well, I'll go home and I'll see the past." No, I won't. Yeah,
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 it was interesting. It was an
yeah.
eye opener.
Nice. Um, Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
Sally, hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for the meditation and your reading. I was thinking about how, I know my alcoholism is so rooted in shame, and that, regret for me is a different word today, but I mostly at times would think about my past from this almost like addicted to shame based thinking way that
Yeah.
I don't know how to identify myself about anything I've done without negating it or thinking I'm bad, not the
Mm.
action is bad. And because that doesn't have anything to do with the present moment, like the way I feel about myself is in the present moment.
Yeah.
I have to watch really carefully. When I'm not feeling shame, I can not regret the past because it doesn't exist and I don't have a problem with it. But, when I'm in a shame spiral, I can regret absolutely everything I have done because my brain
Mhm.
is just experiencing that shame and worthlessness. And, so I understand that promise today and I can watch when I slip into that feeling. But it makes me sad for my present day me that I'm still trying to learn how to replace all the thoughts that only knew one way to see myself, because it was a real solution with my parents. If I took on the shame in the family, if I said, oh, everything's my fault, they actually left me alone and I escaped abuse, So I have to remember today, like, oh, that is not a solution. That's not real. But it can feel very real. So anyway, it's just kind of how I have to remember when I hear that, because I'll get snarky when I hear that damn promise read.
Yeah.
I have to just ask myself, am I in shame or not in shame? So anyway, I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. It's really, I mean, I think you're pointing to something really important, that, and that, you know, I'm, I'm very determined to not sort of gloss over the challenges that are presented by spiritual teachings, and to sort of say, oh, well, it's all good and whatever, it's like, that's there, that's real. And and, and yet, as you say, and as you're seeing, it's like, okay, this is not really useful. It's not really true, but I get caught in it. So for me, the challenge is to be, uh, to do the work, to push back, to repeatedly, right? To intervene, intervene in my own thinking, because a shame spiral is a thought spiral. It starts as a thought spiral, and then it comes into the body, and all the existing, all the historic feelings that are associated with that arise in the body, and then then you're in the whole, I think, it's like a cloud you get in, where everything is colored by it, and it's very hard to break that then. And you have to really, to me, I sort of have to do something, very often something social or active, or something that sort of like gets me out of me. But before that, my before the spiral happens, if I can catch the triggers, the initial things that are like setting it off, and I start to see that, oh, what are the things that set this off? And then be more vigilant in those moments, so that the thought spiral doesn't take hold, so that maybe the thought or the trigger is there, but then the mindfulness, there's enough mindfulness to go, oh, there's that. Thank you for sharing, and be able to sort of shift in some way in that moment. Uh, because I think we have to have tools. It's not enough for me to, like, as you're sort of saying, it's not enough to just have these aphorisms, or like, this is, oh, I should just go to a meeting, or I shouldn't think this, or this isn't really true, so I shouldn't believe it. It's like, it doesn't matter how many times I tell myself that. If I get lost in it, if I really get if it gets its hooks in me, those answers just aren't enough. So it takes a lot of commitment and work, and also sometimes just patience and forgiveness. Like, okay, I'm here. I'm just gonna have to breathe and walk through this. It won't last forever. That's my sort of final response when I get trapped in those negative mind states, is just go, okay, well, I don't have an easy out from this, but I'm not going to drink or use, and I'm not going to, file for divorce. I'm going to just, not going to quit my job or whatever. I'll just keep going, and it'll, at least I know it'll pass at some point. Well, I appreciate your nodding. Thanks. Abigail, hello.
Hello. Nice to see you.
You as
I got to
well.
meditate outside tonight for the first time. It's been warm enough and my porch is set up. So I actually got to sit outside. It was lovely. As a parent, as a drunk parent, it's I think the word regret, when he talks about, when you mentioned dropping that burden, we put that burden down, but we keep the sadness. I harmed my children by being the drunk that I was. And I can make all the amends that I can, but I will always have sadness.
Yeah.
I harmed my parents. I did the same. I never told you, I also called my father Bill.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Interesting.
Uh,
My parents, I left the East Coast because they were such terrible alcoholics.
uh-huh.
But really, I left because I wanted to drink.
Mhm.
And I lost my mother. I get to keep that sadness.
Well, I mean, this is where aging is so, it's the challenge, right? Is my aging going to become a time of just increasing bitterness and withdrawal, or can I grow in wisdom and in heart and acceptance to see this is the nature of human life, generational trauma, our own mistakes that can't be corrected. You know, loss is just, built in. And there's no easy way with that. We know that, like, people are always trying to sort of offer, like, the solution, the thing that'll make everything easier and better. But, I don't believe in that, really. I believe we learn to live with loss, and we learn to live with pain, and particularly as we get older. And the older we get, the more people we lose. And maybe in some ways, it we get more clarity about the past. Certainly, our youth starts to look very different than it did when we were in it. I sound really bleak and depressing right now, don't I? God.
Trying to make it bleak.
And
I didn't.
yeah, no. And I, I say all this really. What I really mean is that we can learn to live with loss and to not be, crippled by it, and not, because there are some people who can't, who have loss, and they just live the rest of their lives angry and bitter. And I also think that recovery and the process we go through in recovery gives us the tools for that kind of resilience. It teaches us something about loss, that a healing can happen. So, yeah. Before we go, Gail, hello.
Hi, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My attitude about regrets is that it's that I wish I had acted differently, under some circumstances. And the way I've always handled this, and I don't know how long this has been, but it's been a long time, is that to recognize, well, if only I had acted differently, and then I realized if I had been the person that if I am this person back then, and how can I expect myself back then to behave knowing what I know today and with the experiences I have today. I didn't have those. You know, and when they say, they used to say, you know, your mother did this best she could. And I always said, BS, she didn't. But, you know, eventually I came to realize that, in fact, that was true because that's what she knew.
Yeah.
And I wanted her to behave in a way that was not the way she had been brought up. And so, you know, so I don't have a lot of regrets. I just know that had I been who I am now, then, you know, I would not have wanted to have acted that way back then, but I wasn't that person then. That's kind of been my attitude towards it. Maybe I'm just getting myself off the hook easy or something.
No, I think that's it. It's a Rod Stewart song. It keeps playing on one of my Spotify lists, you know. I wish that I knew then what I know now when I was younger. Anyway, it's an annoying song, and I'm sorry to put it into your head. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of it's sort of the you know, perpetual point of being older, like, you know, and it's you know, yeah, when you look at it, you're like, what's the point of that? So I want to do a little bit of loving kindness practice. I'm seeing there were some questions about the I mean, about getting in contact with someone and just to, I think you put Angela put the contact sheet in here in the chat. So if you're, a lot of the people who are regulars here have put their names and contact information on that. So if you open it by clicking on it, you can download it or just, you know, have it available. And because we do want to be able to have resources for people to be in touch with each other or to ask for help from each other or to offer help to each other. So that is great. Oh, and Angela's put it in again. So yeah, so I want to do some practice this week. There's two people who passed away this week. One was a 40-year-old mother of two young'uns, and the other was a 19-year-old who was a freshman in college who died in a car accident. And they're both, you know, they're just people that I've known, and they're not people that I'm personally really close with, but they're very, you know, I have some close connections kind of to them. And I was just feeling really how sad it is when people die too young. And so maybe just to do some loving kindness for them. So maybe to sit back for a moment and breathing into your heart, breathing into the space of caring and compassion. And may Jenny be free. However, she might still exist. And may all those who love her, her children and her family, heal from the great grief of loss. And may Dixie be free in whatever way her spirit or karma lives on. And may her family heal from the great loss of her in their life. And each of us has known loss, and loss is inevitable. And all beings know loss. May each of us and may all beings learn to hold loss with a spacious, compassionate, gentle, accepting heart. May we be able to live with as much love for each other as we can possibly feel, possibly express. May we give fully of ourselves in each moment. May all beings be free from suffering. Okay, thank you all for dropping by. Be back here Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and back here next Friday at the same time. So thank you. Be well. Happy Memorial Day.